The first thing you learn as a fire lookout is that your job is not really about fire. Your job is about the surface of things, the angle of light on granite, the temperature differential between the shaded and sunlit faces of a ridge. The color of smoke, gray, means grass. Blue-white means green timber. Black means somebody's car. You learn to read the country the way a stenographer reads shorthand, and after your third or fourth week alone in a 14 by 14 glass room, 100 feet above the tree line, you begin to feel that you are not so much a person as an instrument the mountain uses to describe itself. I say this so you understand the kind of confidence I had when the first request came in. My tower was Fire Lookout Tower 14, in the Halden district of what I will call the Northern Interior Forestry Service, because I am not going to give you the real name of the agency, and because the real name would not help you find anything anyway. Tower 14 sits on the shoulder of a mountain called Cressback, elevation 9,200 feet, 41 miles by road from the nearest ranger station, and 11 miles by trail from anything you could reasonably call a neighbor. I was in my 4th season. I had already been offered a permanent posting the following spring. When the Halden dispatcher called me on the afternoon of August 19th and asked whether I would be willing to pull my logs for a search reconstruction request, I said yes without thinking, the way you say yes when someone asks whether you'd like coffee. The missing hiker's name was Adriana Cole, 34 years old, solo backpacker. Last confirmed sighting at the Fen Creek Trailhead parking lot at 8:15 a.m. on August 15th, 4 days earlier. She had told a friend she was going to do the Cressback Loop, a 2-day route that passes about 1.25 miles east of my tower along an old fire service road they call the Pole Line Trail. Search and Rescue wanted my visual logs for the 15th and 16th, standard procedure. Lookouts are required to note any hiker or vehicle we spot in our sector, with a timestamp, a compass bearing, and a brief description. Most days I record nothing at all. On weekends in July, I might record 8 or 9 parties. On a Tuesday morning in mid-August, on a trail as remote as the pole line, 1 entry would be unusual. I had 1 entry, 10:42 a.m., August 15th. Single hiker, northbound, pole line trail, green pack, dark hat, walking pace. I remembered writing it. I remembered the woman. I had watched her for maybe 30 seconds through the east binoculars, waiting to see if she'd stop at the wooden mile marker where hikers usually stop to check the map board. And she had not stopped. She had walked past it without slowing, and I remembered thinking, without any particular concern, that she looked like someone who did not need the map. I typed the entry into the reconstruction form and sent it back to Halden and forgot about it for 6 days. On August 25th, the same dispatcher called again. Different hiker. A man named Peter Almazan, missing since August 22nd. Same trail. I pulled my logs. There he was, 10:42 a.m., August 22nd. Single hiker, northbound, pole line trail. Gray pack, no hat, walking pace. I noticed the time. I noticed it the way you notice that 2 songs on the radio in a row have the same drum pattern, A mild, momentary interest, gone in a second. Coincidences accumulate in a lookout tower. You have a lot of hours to catalog them. I filed the entry and made a note in the corner of my personal notebook, in pencil, to check whether the trail had some feature, a creek crossing, a bench, a good view of the north face that would naturally cause hikers to reach that point at that hour. 2 days later, I was reviewing the previous season's binder, looking for a fire weather comparison I needed for a report, and I found a search reconstruction request I had not personally filed. It had been handled by the observer who preceded me on Tower 14, a man named Ellis Voigt, who retired at the end of the 2019 season. The missing hiker's name was Marion Deal. The date was September 3rd, 2019. The observation entry, in Voigt's tight, slanted handwriting, read, 10:42 a.m. Single hiker, northbound, pole line trail. Red jacket, walking pace. I want to be careful how I describe what I did next, because I am aware in retrospect that this was the moment I stepped off the trail. I was supposed to be walking and onto a different one. At the time, it did not feel like a decision. It felt like the natural extension of the work. I pulled every search reconstruction request in the Tower 14 archive. There were binders going back to 1978. The tower itself was built in 1954, but the archive in the cabinet only started when the district went to standardized reporting. I found 41 missing hiker cases with reconstruction requests filed against Tower 14. Every one of them had an observation entry from this tower. Every entry described a single hiker walking north on the pole line trail. Every entry was logged between 10:38 a.m. and 10:46 a.m. Every entry described the subject as walking at a normal pace. Not one entry mentioned the hiker looking up. I want to pause here and describe the tower, because the geometry matters. Fire Lookout Tower 14 is a standard L4-style cab on a steel frame, oriented with its long axis running east-northeast to west-southwest. The east-facing window looks out across the Fen Creek drainage toward a series of ridges called the Cut Banks. The north window looks up canyon at the Halden Divide. The south window looks down onto the pole line road as it descends toward the district boundary. The west window looks at nothing anyone cares about, a broad slope of scree and juniper. The pole line trail runs on the east side of Cressback Mountain, entering my sector from the south, contouring around the mountain's eastern flank, and exiting to the north. For most of its length in my sector, the trail is on the far side of a subsidiary ridge called Bowen's Rib. Bowen's Rib is a forested spur that comes off the main peak at about the 8,000-foot contour and screens roughly 2.5 miles of the trail from any direct line of sight to the tower. I want to be absolutely clear about this. From the east window of Tower 14, you cannot see the pole line trail. You cannot see it at 10:42 a.m. You cannot see it at any hour. You cannot see it in any season. The rib is in the way. There is a section, about 400 yards long, near the north end of my sector, where the trail crests a small saddle and briefly rises above the rib. But that section is nearly 3 miles away, and the sight line is blocked by a stand of subalpine fir that the district's own visibility study revised in 2011, identifies as an obscuring canopy. I had known this since my first week. Every lookout knows the blind spots of their tower. It is one of the first things you learn. You memorize where you can see and where you cannot see, because when a plume of smoke rises and you have to give a bearing, you need to know instantly whether you're looking at the fire itself or at a column that has drifted from somewhere behind a ridge you cannot see over. I had never once, in 4 seasons on Tower 14, been able to see the pole line trail from my east window, and yet in my own handwriting, I had a log entry that said I had watched Adrian Cole walk past a wooden mile marker on that trail at 10:42 a.m. on August 15th. I had watched her. I remembered watching her. I remembered the green pack and the dark hat, and the small, unhurried motion of her shoulders as she walked past the marker without stopping. I remembered a view I could not have had. I did not sleep well after that. This is not a dramatic statement. Lookouts do not sleep well anyway. The wind on Crestback comes up around 10 at night, and the cab creaks against its guy wires until dawn. And by the 4th season, you have gotten used to it in the way you get used to a roommate's snoring. You sleep, but shallowly, and you wake at anything unusual. What I did over the next several nights was read. The Tower 14 archive was more extensive than I had realized. Beyond the search reconstruction binders, the cabinet held daily weather logs, radio transcripts, visibility studies, staffing rosters, and a bound set of what were called shift handover notes, which were the informal messages that each retiring seasonal observer left for the next. The handover notes were the most useful because they were the least official. They contained things like the propane regulator sticks in cold weather. Tap it with a wrench, and the ravens on the north cornice will steal any food you leave on the catwalk. And do not answer the phone between 10:30 and 11 a.m. unless it is Halden Dispatch. That last note appeared in one form or another in the handover from every observer going back to at least 1994. Do not answer the phone between 10:30 and 11 a.m. unless it is Halden Dispatch. Between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, take all radio traffic on Channel 3 only. If the east binoculars are already set on the rib when you arrive in the morning, leave them. The 10:40 window is continuity. Do not initiate outside contact. The word continuity appeared 6 times in the handover notes I read that week. Always capitalized, never defined. I searched the daily weather logs for the dates that matched the missing hiker cases. Every one of them was a clear morning. Not most, every one. 41 cases spanning 4 decades, and every single one occurred on a day with visibility rated Class 1 or Class 2, the 2 highest categories in the district's system. Statistically, this should not have been possible. The Halden district averages about 55 Class 1 or Class 2 days per fire season. Even if every missing hiker happened to walk on a clear day, the probability of 41 out of 41 falling in that window was small enough that I calculated it twice and got a number I did not want to write down. Then I found the visibility studies. The Halden district had commissioned 3 formal visibility studies of Tower 14 in 1987, 2001, and 2011. Each study included a full 360-degree map of the tower's field of view, with obscured areas shaded and sight lines projected out to the horizon. The Poline Trail was shaded on all three maps, but there was a fourth map in the cabinet. It was not a formal study. It was a hand-drawn overlay on onion skin paper, filed loose behind the 2011 study, with no title and no signature. On this map, the shading had been removed from the Poline Trail. A single narrow corridor, maybe 50 yards wide, ran from the east window of Tower 14, across Bowen's rib, and terminated exactly at the wooden mile marker where I had watched Adrian Cole fail to stop. Someone had labeled the corridor in pencil, in the same tight, slanted handwriting I recognized from Ellis Voigt's log entries. Observation Corridor 14-E, Extended Horizon. Do not annotate the unofficial maps. I called Ellis Voigt on the 3rd of September. His number was in the retired observer's roster, which is technically confidential, but which every lookout keeps a copy of, because the retired observers are people who understand the specific problems of your specific tower. He answered on the second ring. He sounded older than I expected. He asked who I was, and I told him, and I said I was on Tower 14, and he was quiet for what I would estimate was 8 seconds. Then he said, "Are you calling from the tower phone or your cell?" I said cell. He said, "Go outside, walk 50 yards from the tower, then call me back." I did what he said. It was late afternoon. The wind had died. I walked down the catwalk stairs and along the ridge crest to a rock outcrop I sometimes used to eat lunch, and I called him back. He said, "How many have you found?" I said, 41. He said, "That's this tower only. That's not the network." I did not know what to say to that. I asked him what the network was. He said, "I'm not going to tell you that on the phone. I'm going to tell you 3 things, and then I'm going to hang up, and then I'm going to ask you not to call me again. Do you understand?" I said yes. He said, "First, the corridor is real. It is not a hallucination, and it is not a supply of confabulated memories. You are actually seeing what you think you are seeing. That is the part that is hardest to accept, and it is also the part you have to accept before anything else makes sense. Second, the log entries you don't remember writing were not written by you. They were written by the tower. The handwriting is a property of the position, not of the person. Every observer who sits in that chair, at that window, writes in the same hand during the 1040 window. I don't know why. Nobody who has stayed long enough to find out has been available to explain it. Third, the office you are about to be contacted by is called the Wilderness Observation Continuity Office. When they call, they will not identify themselves that way. They will say they are from Regional Compliance. You will be offered a permanent posting. If you accept the posting, you will remain on Tower 14, and you will be trained to file the reports properly, and you will be paid roughly 3 times what you are being paid now. If you decline the posting, you will finish your season, and you will not be rehired, and you will spend the rest of your life uncertain about which parts of what you saw were real. I asked him which he had chosen. He said, "I declined. That is why I am telling you this. The ones who accept do not make phone calls." Then he hung up. The call from Regional Compliance came the next morning at 10:47 a.m., 7 minutes after the end of what I was now thinking of as the window. The caller identified himself as a program officer named Halbrook. His voice was pleasant and unhurried. He said the district was reviewing my file for a permanent appointment, and he wondered whether I would have time in the coming week to discuss what he called the more specialized aspects of the Tower 14 assignment. I said I would. He said, "Excellent. In the meantime, I would like to send you some background reading, a few directives, a policy memorandum, and the standing instruction for your tower, standard orientation material. Please review it at your convenience and do not photocopy or transmit any part of it." The envelope arrived by helicopter courier the following afternoon, along with my regular resupply. The pilot did not mention it. It was in the pack with the eggs. Inside the envelope were 17 pages. I read them twice. I'm going to describe them from memory because I did not keep them, and I did not keep them because at the end of the season I burned them in the tower's wood stove, which is not something I am proud of, but which I want to be honest about. The first document was a policy memorandum from the Wilderness Observation Continuity Office, dated 1971, establishing what it called the Extended Horizon Program. The memorandum explained that certain fire lookout towers, identified during the initial forestry survey of the 1930s, had been found to possess what the memorandum called anomalous observational reach, the capacity to record visual events occurring outside their surveyed field of view. The office had been established to catalog these towers, to manage the resulting observations, and to develop procedures for what the memorandum called the humane administration of persistent subjects. The second document was a list of the towers in the program. There were 19 of them, distributed across the western mountain regions. Tower 14 was on the list. Beside each tower was a designation, a corridor number, a bearing, and a time window. The time windows varied. Some towers had morning windows. Some had windows at dusk. One had a window that opened in a district I will know. The third document was the standing instruction for Tower 14. It was 1 page. It read, in part, during the daily observation window, 10:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. local, the assigned observer will maintain visual contact with Observation Corridor 14E and record any recorded passage in the tower log using the standard entry format. Recorded passages are to be treated as ordinary hiker sightings for the purposes of the log. Under no circumstances will the observer attempt to initiate contact with a persistent subject, whether by radio, signal, or physical descent from the tower. Under no circumstances will the observer look directly at a persistent subject's face through the binoculars for a duration exceeding 4 seconds. The observer will not, under any circumstances, wave. The fourth document was a glossary. This is where I learned the terminology. A recorded passage was a single observed transit of a persistent subject through a corridor. A persistent subject was an individual whose recorded passages had been logged across more than one calendar year. A standing visual contact was a persistent subject who had been logged in more than 10 separate years. Tower 14 had, according to the glossary's appendix, 3 standing visual contacts. The oldest had been in continuous observation since 1961. The 5th document was the list of persistent subjects associated with Tower 14. I read the names. I recognized 11 of them from the search reconstruction binders. Adrienne Cole was on the list. Her first recorded passage was dated June 4th, 1978. She'd been 34 years old on August 15th of the current year. She had also been 34 years old in every prior recorded passage, going back 47 years. The remaining documents were procedural. They described what happened after a recorded passage was filed. The report was routed to a division called the Search Reconstruction Division, which coordinated with local search and rescue to ensure that the resulting missing persons case was investigated in a manner consistent with the observation. The division was responsible for producing what the documents called closing narratives, the accounts of terrain, weather, and probable route that were released to families and to the press. The narratives were, according to the procedural notes, constructed to be true in every particular except one. The one particulars was never specified. I understood that this was deliberate. I did not accept the posting. I did not decline it either, exactly. I told Halbrook that I needed to finish the season before I could commit to anything permanent. And he said, of course, and that we would speak again in October. And I understood from his tone that he already knew what my answer would be, and that he was not troubled by it. I think, looking back, that the office does not particularly need the ones who decline. It has the tower, and the tower has the handwriting, and the next observer will sit in the same chair at the same window and produce the same log entries in the same hand, and the office will file them in the same binders, and the ones who decline will spend their retirements the way Ellis Voigt was spending his walking 50 yards from their houses before they answer the phone. The rest of the season, I did my job. I recorded weather. I reported one small lightning strike near Bowers Rib on September 11th, and watched the smoke jumpers pack it out the following day. I did not look through the east binoculars during the observation window. I set the tripod facing west, and I sat in the west chair and I read the standing instruction until I could recite it. And every morning at 10:30 a.m., I heard the small dry click of the east binoculars adjusting on their mount, which was not a thing binoculars can do by themselves. And every morning at some point between 10:38 and 10:46, my right hand would pick up the log pen and write an entry I did not compose. The handwriting was mine. Ellis had told the truth about that. It was mine in the sense that my hand produced it, but it was not mine in the sense that I chose the words. The words were always the same. The compass direction was always the same. The pace was always the same. Only the descriptions of the packs and the hats varied, and I have wondered since whether the packs and the hats varied because the subjects were really wearing them, or because the tower needed a plausible detail to justify the entry. On the last day of the season, October 4th, I closed the tower according to procedure. I drained the water lines. I sealed the propane. I locked the archives cabinet. I turned in my keys at the district office in Halden, and I signed the exit paperwork, and I drove home. I did not see Adrienne Cole during the last 5 weeks. The window continued. Entries continued. I did not read them. I have been out of the service for 4 years. I did not go back the next season, and I did not apply for the permanent posting, and Halbrook did not call again after October. I moved to a city in a different state, and I took a job that has nothing to do with observation. I do not go into the mountains anymore, which is a loss I feel more sharply than I expected to, but which I have accepted as the price of the decision I did not quite make. 3 weeks ago, I received an envelope. There was no return address. The postmark was from a town in the Halden district. Inside was a photocopy of a single page from the current year's Tower 14 log. The date at the top of the page was from this summer. The handwriting was mine. There was one entry on the page in the format I remembered. 11:07 a.m. Single hiker observed passing north below Tower 14. Subject failed to look up. Observation successfully recorded. The time was wrong. It should have been in the 10:40 window. I stared at the entry for a long time before I understood what the shifted time meant. The window is not fixed. It moves. Something is drifting. I turned the page over. On the reverse, in the same hand, a second entry had already been written. The date on the second entry was 3 weeks after the first, which is to say, this week. The week in which I was, at that moment, holding the envelope. Search request expected within 48 hours. Below that, in a hand that was still mine, but that I do not remember producing. Subject, current observer, Tower 14. Recorded passage first logged 1978. Persistent subject status confirmed across 4 decades of prior transits. Corridor 14. E remains active. Observation successfully recorded. I have looked at the envelope every day since it arrived. I have not called anyone. I have not gone outside to make the call I know I am supposed to make. There is no one I could reasonably call. I am writing this down because I want there to be a version of what happened that exists outside the archive on Crestback Mountain. I am not under any illusion that writing it down will change what has already been recorded. The tower has been watching me on the pole line trail since before I was born. The tower has been watching me walk past the wooden mile marker without stopping, in a green pack and a dark hat, at a normal pace, every clear morning in August, for 47 years. The tower has been recording this in my own handwriting for the entire time. My 4 seasons on Crestback were not the years I observed the corridor. They were the years I was briefly on the other side of the glass. I understand now why the standing instruction forbids waving. I understand why it forbids looking at a subject's face for more than 4 seconds. I understand that the instruction is not there to protect the subject. If you hike in the mountains and you pass beneath a fire lookout tower on a clear morning, and you feel for a moment the small, unmistakable sensation of being watched, do not look up. The observer is doing their job. They are not allowed to wave back.